This lecture is based on our initial readings. What are social institutions? So what we're going to cover are what are the 5 basic social institutions, what are the 3 sociological perspectives on social institutions, and what are the 5 major functions of institutions. So let's first start off with what are social institutions. And so Richard Schaefer says that social institutions are organized patterns of beliefs and behaviors that are centered on basic social needs. And the biggest part of this is our basic social needs. So we'll find out what are our basic social needs in just a second. So let's first say what are the 5 basic social institutions. Well, the first social institution is the family. If you think about it, this is probably one of the first social institutions that you come in contact with. Next would be religion. And again, based on your family, you will also come in contact with a religious social institution. Then we'll say the government. And again, because of your family, you will probably very quickly come in contact with some aspect of the social institution of government, being that the government issues you a birth certificate, the government allows your family to choose your name. However, they can also say, no, you can't name your child that. And so the government is one of the 5 basic social institutions that you will come in contact with relatively quickly. And then the next one is education. And education as a social institution is one of the key components, whether it's you're being educated via education from a academic perspective, a school perspective, a religious perspective, or a family perspective. And the last 5, one of the 5 basic social institutions is the economy or commerce. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. Now, all societies have social institutions, and so cultural universals. This is what Schaefer calls a cultural universal. That we have general practices in every culture that meets our need for food, clothing, shelter, social order, support, and occupational training. So we might have also these general practices such as cooking or marriage or religious rituals. All of these are cultural universals as they meet our needs for food, clothing, shelter, support, reassurance, occupational trainer, and social order. Now, there are 5 major functions of institutions, and these are replacing personnel, teaching new recruits, producing and distributing goods and services, preserving order, and providing and maintaining a sense of purpose. So the first function is replacing personnel. And how do we replace personnel? Well, we have immigration. The government decides this. Can we allow people to immigrate? Do they feel a need within our group or our society? We can also annex property and take in the residents. And you may see this specifically mainly within your local city or county government, that they may add in other areas and incorporate them into their city. The government also, any government or any group may have slaves, and this is another way that we replace personnel within our group. From a family perspective, what do? Well, we have babies, and that's our replacement, whether we birth them, whether we adopt them, that is, whether we just take them in. This is how we replace our family group. So, in teaching new recruits, if we don't have new recruits, then we cannot survive as a society or group. And also, we don't want our new members to reject the established behavior and responsibilities. So it's not just that we bring new people in, we also have to encourage them to learn and get our values. And now the learning can take place, our basic skills can take place within our family. It might take place within our occupation. It might take place formally in schools where learning is a manifest function. It might take place informally through latent functions such as interaction and negotiation in our peer groups. It also could take place that we're looking at mass media, and one of the reasons that mass media is included, how do you learn to read? A lot of times when you were little, you might have gotten a newspaper or a weekly reader, or a Scholastic, or any of those little flyers. And also, one of the big things, you'll hear people say, well, how did you learn English? How did you learn to lose some of your accent? Well, it's by watching television. Children learn mimicking. They hear how to pronounce something. That's one of the reasons why a Spanish language show such as Dora is so great for little kids to understand and be able to reflect in how do we speak. And then we also have to teach from a religious perspective how we want our members of the group to believe religiously and using our sacred text. Now, in producing goods and services, one of the things that we would look at would be food preparation. So, how are we prepping the food? How did we get the food? Where did the food come from? Then we also have our economy, which shows how we had everything navigate through the economy. Now, labor law, commerce, how do we buy, sell, produce goods and services, and then also healthcare as a distributor of goods and services. So now we're talking about preserving order, and one of the ways that we preserve order, and one of the reasons is we want to preserve order in our society or our group because we have to preserve our culture. We have to defend against interlopers. So one thing that we might do is we preserve order through our child rearing. How we maintain order within that. We have sexual behavior or marriage concepts of you need to marry within the group, which we have endogenous marriage and in-group marriage. So, for example, if we want to maintain our culture, we have to marry within our culture, such as the Amish, a religious culture that dictates who we can date, who we can marry, and what we can do. Now, the other thing is that we also have our government. We have laws, and then we have our moral codes. And this is another way of how we preserve order. So in talking about maintaining and providing a sense of purpose, one thing that we want to do is, we have our patriotism or our love of our country. We may have our love of our tribal group. So we want to maintain a sense of purpose within our tribal group. Maybe we want a sense of purpose from our religion. Our religion gives us that maintenance of a sense of purpose and our own personal code, moral code and ethics also allows us to maintain a sense of purpose. Well, when the three sociological perspectives on social institutions function, and we'll study this as we go along, functionalists. So, functionalists stress the basic needs that social institutions fulfill. That's what they do. Conflict theorists see social institutions as sources of inequality and oppression, but on the opposite end, they also see it from the perspective of nurturing and reassurance in order to maintain social cohesion within the group. We want no conflict in the group, and we don't want another group causing conflict. Now, interactionists stress the way in which social institutions help to define our own social roles and status. If you want to read anything else, you can go back and read the the chapter that I provided out of Sociology Matters.